Yours. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Peter Louis. I work for EPD. In fact, for the study guide preparation and the syllabus preparation, and you can see Professor Wang Tao is also involved. He's sitting right over here with the audience. So if you have any questions after my presentations, you can raise it. Both myself and Professor Wang Tao would be happy to deal with it. Okay. For the environmental science management and policy part of the exam, as alluded earlier by Professor Lau, this is an important part. By way of design, why this is important? Because, well, you know, this year we already mentioned that you need to have a pass in all subject areas. But the question is, you can correct the strategy, or you may, decide what to do with your time to tackle the exam. But it's quite safe to say that without a pass in this section, it's almost impossible to pass the whole exam. So, with that in mind, this is the design of the whole exam's philosophy, is that we want members to have a really broad understanding of the science, management, and policy issues. This is the philosophy of the HKIQEP, but I tell you, it's also the recruitment philosophy for EPD as well. So for some prospective applicants or members, if later on, if they wish to pursue a career in civil service, this is quite fundamental. Okay, with that in mind, let's see. I think today the important message here is to not to dwell on the nitty-gritty things, but to give you some ideas. What do we mean by this environmental science, management and policy things? In the process of putting together the whole things is quite mind-boggling for me and Professor Kong as well, that almost anything can fit in this framework. So it's kind of difficult to have a clear definition of what's involved or what is not involved. So that's why this year with the study guide, which you will receive after July 1st, I'll give you some better ideas of what we're talking about. But today we will go through the syllabus and some final details of the syllabus. But the important part is actually the sample questions. To give you some ideas, what are the things that we're looking for. But Alexis Lau mentioned earlier on, these questions are just the illustrations of what we are planning to do or we used before. So not necessary will be used again in the exam this year. But it gives you some idea, sometime, why this is important. But if I may, before I dive in for the presentation, I'm quite mindful of the time for the 1 hour allocated, is that sometimes we care more about how you receive the information than citing something from a book or from the press that without your own analysis I give you one example, because I didn't look at the question bank, so I can say it right now, is that, for example, the question on dioxin, for example, we don't know why, but quite a lot of students or applicants, when they answer questions like dioxins, they have the impression that, the intake of dioxins is from air. We breathe it. So then when we ask the students why you take this kind of approach, they think, oh, this is what we heard from the news, but this is the problem. So in fact, I can give you the answer quite easy, but it's not that all the news are bad. I mean, you need your own interpretation, your thinking. Best of all, go to the reference material, credible reference material. For example, the correct answer is, for that dioxin intake, correct answer is food, what we eat. In fact, 90-something%, I would say 95, 98% of the dioxin in our body is through intake from food. But when, student taking the exam, they just use their impression or they heard from the news. Because from air intake, it accounts only 1 to 2% of the intake. So this is the kind of thing for professional members, we need to be careful. As a distinction, professional member from a member of the public is that we need to filter the information, critically look at the issues, and form our own opinion. Okay. It's a good way, I'm mindful of the time, it's a good way to illustrate that the environmental science is a really broad subject area. It involves how we look at the nature, how the human impact, local pollution, earth, important issue like climate and ozone hole, and look at the solutions, policy, and how we can improve on this green technology and stuff. But the key issue is actually on the interconnection of all these areas. They do not exist on its own because each one of these areas interacts with others. So from time to time, we need to be careful. When we try to solve a problem, are we creating a bigger problem? So this is the kind of thing. Or if we do nothing on certain thing, are they going to get better? So a lot of the human interaction, for example, energy use, in fact, is directly related to air. I would say a lot of air improvement issues stemming from the clean energy, better energy utilization. So this kind of mitigation methods later on we'll touch on. A lot of these kind of things are interrelated. So this kind of interconnection with different topics of subject areas in environmental science are important. I'm not trying to give you the impression that after going through this or the study guide, you know everything about environmental science or management or policy, but then just to give you a flavor, what is involved. And we are not, in fact, part of the disclaimer is that we are not trying to give you the impressions that once you know all this, you will pass the exam. There's no, not necessary a connection there, but then hopefully by giving you this kind of information, you will have a better idea what we are talking about. The syllabus part is known to you, is on our website. For example, the fundamentals on the environmental science, global, multimedia. We have beefed up or updated a lot on the international environmental conventions. You will see when you receive the study guides. It's quite a daunting task to put all this together, but then when you go through this, you have to have this humble feeling in mind that internationally, globally, and locally, a lot of things have been done to tackle the environmental issues. But we see some success. But then the key issue here is that the long-term commitment by government, local government, and community. It's not a process that some of these big problems can be solved overnight. But this concerted effort is the key issue here. Number 5 here, some of the pollution prevention, design, and so on. Now I have to say this because a lot of developing countries or regions, sometimes they take the view that because of economic development, they can first pollute the environment and then deal with the cleanup later. I can tell you the cleanup part typically are 10 times, the cost is 10 times the cost of doing it right in the first place. So I think the philosophy a lot of time is to move pollution control, prevention upstream. I can give you one example I learned from one boss before is that the best way to solve a problem is not to have a problem in the first place. Moving pollution control upstream. Well, now again, this is a really fine details about the syllabus. A lot of the informations are easily understood, but then specifically about 1.51, 1.52, 1.53. In the study guide, we don't give you much examples because it's just too diverse. You need to go to a specific case to look up those calculations and so on. My take on some of the uncertainty analysis is that when we look at numbers, when we do the critical analysis, a lot of time you will hear about this precision, accuracy, error analysis. But my take is more on the uncertainty analysis well, it has a lot to do with the lack of information. It's not so much about calculating what is right, what is wrong, or these plus or minus things. In fact, a lot of time in environmental science issues, lack of information is the major problem, or lack of data transparency or lack of data is the fundamental part. Okay. Remediation and restoration technologies. Now, when you go through the study guides, when you go through the syllabus, you may have a question in mind that sometimes some of the issues are overlapping with the air, with the solid waste treatment or wastewater and so on. So that's why the subject area sometimes they overlap. But then the important thing is that, well, you look at the science part, you always look at this as remediation or solutions if certain problem exists. Atmospheric ozone depletion, this is this is a very important issue for Hong Kong, for Pearl Delta region. And in fact, I would say this for the whole of China right now. Give you some example. In California, Los Angeles, it takes them, I think, more than 50, 60 years to address this problem. So a lot of time, I would say this, decision makers are not very good at tackling two problems at the same time. So a lot of time when you go through the development process, for example, they deal with the, right now, deal with the particular issue, PM 2.5, for example. And once that is stabilized, I think progressively you will hear a lot more about the secondary pollutant issue. But then, interesting thing I want to point out here is that a lot of students or practitioners, they keep asking the questions of the good ozone and the bad ozone. Why is it in the troposphere is a problem? In the stratosphere is the ozone holes problem. Well, again, this needs to be carefully analyzed, and not that all ozones are bad. But for the tropospheric region, yes, ozone is a problem. Now, global climate change. This is a very hot issue internationally on the news. Again, we should have our own professional views about this. We have also added or clarified a lot of the biodiversity and bioaccumulative substance issues in the study guide. The unconventional pollutants, this is really interesting. We have expanded a section on this in the study guide to clarify the POPs, the endocrine disruptors, pharmaceuticals. What do we mean on this? In fact, a lot of new pharmaceuticals products are in the process of manufacturing some of these products. Some nanoparticle, nanocarbon, nano things, nano substance are doing a lot of damage to our ocean. So internationally, this is a really hot topic, so we have expanded on that. So again, you can pick it up from the news or science reports or articles. This is quite new, so we're working on this as well. Environmental impact assessment. Again, there will be dedicated sections elsewhere to look at this. Environmental management. This is very interesting because a lot of time when you look at the organizational environmental policy part, well, for Hong Kong, EPD is responsible in terms of organization for this. But then I think Hong Kong is really good in terms of the leveraging the supports, the talents on the ground to support the government on environmental issues. Or judging from the turnout this morning is that, it's not just a policy issue. If you frame it as an environmental issue, it has a lot of scope for future expansion. Not in the area of study, but in fact, this is a really important area to make Hong Kong better. Why? Because a lot of things we cannot change, but on the environmental policy, we can. Give you one example. When we do a lot of air quality improvement things, a lot of time there was this discussion about blue sky, clear sky. It's good to have that slogan, but deep down, it has to connect with health, people's health, public's health. So the exposure and other things will come in. Now, indicators, of course, performance. I forgot. There's somewhere we have like the health part. Somewhere we have expanded on the ecology. There's one new term we introduced in the study guide, which is very popular in China, not so popular in Hong Kong at this time. It's the ecological civilizations. This is something China is promoting. So we also introduced that kind of concept in our study guide. Cost accounting, the cost part is also important. Sometimes cost-benefit analysis is an important consideration for government to go or not go forward with certain initiative. Pollution prevention. I think this is the best way. As I said, the best way to tackle a problem is that it's not to have a problem in the first place. So we'll see how this go. Land use. We touch on a lot of things that are really relevant for Hong Kong. But how to make the process sustainable is also important. Environmental stewardship product is something. My apology today that I can give you a hint of what's going on, but you will see how it goes in the study guide. Okay. This is a very interesting area, which is part of my work right now. That I'm responsible for the control of marine emissions in Hong Kong right now. Why EPD? Well, we are responsible for the policy, the enforcement, and new regulations for controlling marine emissions. And in fact, that is one example how we involve the public and the stakeholder in the policy development. For example, we are planning to introduce new regulations to tie in with the domestic emission control area in the Pearl River Delta region. And in the process of doing the new regulations, this is quite eye-opening for me as well. The number of consultation sessions we need to go through, and we need to take it through the advisory committee on the environment, and we need to take it through the environmental panel in the electrical, and then it takes another year for the law draftsmen to go through all this and this paperwork. Of course, in comparison with our counterparts in the Pearl River Delta region, they can have the whole process done within a week. It takes us at least 2 years to go take the new environmental initiative or regulation through our electrical process. But I think it's worth it because a lot of time, if without involving the stakeholders, we will receive resistance from many parties. So this is part of our job. But then the policymakers, a lot of time, are quite mindful that how the public or the stakeholder reacts to some new regulation initiatives. Of course, geopolitical considerations, be it local, regional, provincial, international, are quite important. For example, the climate issues is a good example here. Science in public policy formulation. This is, again, very, very good area to focus on. Now, interesting. Command and control, regulatory framework and mechanism. There's no right or wrong. It depends because, for example, right now in China, command and control is very effective in moving forward a lot of the new initiatives because the pollution is so severe. Not that I advocate that they don't consult the public or the stakeholder, but then it depends on which regulatory regime you're talking about. As opposed to the market-based regulatory framework, it's a very good example to contrast the instrument we have to move forward some of these environmental issues. Now, on the 7th International Environmental Conventions, we have a lot of new stuff added to the study guide. I probably would say that this, it has the marine part, a lot of new stuff added. But then I can assure you those materials are there not to annoy you, but to give you some flavor, what we expect from professional members, it's impossible to learn everything, but then to give you some ideas that those are the areas that we feel professional members should equip themselves or acquaint themselves that to have a intelligent decision made on those issues. Now, on the suggested material, we could have listed out more things, but then I think the textbook, we made a lot of reference or in terms of materials from Richard Wright, his book, quite popular. Again, I would say no single textbook would cover all the things we just talked about, but those are important reference materials you should acquaint yourself in preparation for the exam. But also I think I would encourage you to go through the study guide, not to shock you, but that is quite a big reference materials that so we refrain ourselves not to print it out. So when we make it available to you, it will be in a digital format. You can go through the material section by section. But then, if you have any suggestions or comments on those materials, more than welcome to let us know.